September 3, 1939, Socon Valley Country Club, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Eugene G. Grace was enjoying his regular Saturday golf game. He was president of Bethlehem Steel Corporation. At age 63, he'd led the company for 23 years. He'd transformed it from a regional steel maker into America's second-largest steel producer. A caddy hurried across the fairway toward Grace's foursome, breathless, urgent. News from Europe. Germany had invaded Poland 2 days earlier. Britain and France had just declared war. World War II had begun. Grace looked at his golf partners. He smiled. "Gentlemen," he said, "we are going to make a lot of money." It wasn't a boast. It was mathematics. War required steel. Enormous quantities of steel. Ships, tanks, guns, ammunition, aircraft, vehicles, all needed steel. Bethlehem Steel would provide it. Within weeks, 300 million in orders flooded in from Britain. Shrapnel, big guns, warships. By the time America entered the war 2 years later, Bethlehem Steel already had $1.3 billion in orders. That's $25 billion in today's money. Over the next 4 years, one steel mill and its workers would produce more military material than entire nations. They would build 1,127 ships. They would forge 1/3 of all American armor plate. They would manufacture 70% of airplane cylinder forgings. They would produce 73 million tons of steel, enough to equal Britain's entire national output. One company, one Pennsylvania town, feeding an entire army. This is the story of how Bethlehem Steel won World War II. The company nobody could match. Bethlehem Steel didn't start as an industrial giant. It began in 1857 as the Saucona Iron Company, a modest iron-making operation in eastern Pennsylvania. Location mattered. South Bethlehem sat at the junction of the North Pennsylvania and Lehigh Valley Railroads. Raw materials could arrive easily. Finished products could ship anywhere. The company initially produced iron railroad rails. America's rapidly expanding railroad network needed millions of rails. But iron rails were soft, broke easily, needed constant replacement. Then Britain mastered steel making. Steel was 16 times more durable than iron. Steel rails could handle heavier trains, lasted longer, required less maintenance. The Saucona Iron Company recognized the future. In 1873, they became the first American company to successfully use the Bessemer process. This revolutionary technique turned molten pig iron into steel. The transformation was immediate. By 1861, during the Civil War, the renamed Bethlehem Iron Company was producing the first steel railroad rails rolled in America. September 26, 1863, a date that changed American industry. But railroad rails were just the beginning. In the 1880s, the U.S. Navy decided to modernize. For decades, American warships were wooden, sail-powered relics. The Navy wanted steel-hulled, steam-powered modern vessels. Bethlehem Iron Company won the contracts. They produced ordnance, large-caliber guns, armor plating. The company developed expertise manufacturing massive naval weapons that few other firms possessed. This specialized knowledge would prove decisive in 2 world wars. In 1899, the company reorganized as Bethlehem Steel Company. 5 years later, in 1904, it became Bethlehem Steel Corporation. The man who made it a giant arrived in 1903. Charles M. Schwab had been president of U.S. Steel Corporation. Personality conflicts drove him out. Bethlehem Steel hired him immediately. Schwab was ruthless, brilliant, charismatic. He understood steel production intimately. He understood finance equally well. He understood how to dominate markets. Under Schwab, Bethlehem Steel expanded aggressively, acquired shipyards, bought coal mines, purchased iron ore deposits in Cuba, absorbed competitor steel companies, built a fleet of ore carriers. By 1905, Bethlehem produced less than 1% of America's steel. By 1940, they produced second only to US Steel. Schwab's partner in this transformation was Eugene G. Grace, an electrical engineer hired to manage growth. Together, they built an empire. In 1916, Grace became president. Schwab remained chairman. The partnership continued until Schwab's death in September 1939. Grace heard the news of Schwab's death the same month World War II began. The timing was symbolic. Schwab had built Bethlehem Steel. Grace would use it to win a war. The preparation nobody saw, December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. But Bethlehem Steel had been preparing for war for over 2 years. When Britain declared war in September 1939, Grace immediately geared production toward military orders. Bethlehem had experience from World War I. During that conflict, the company supplied the Allies with artillery, munitions, ordnance. A $135 million order from Britain in 1916 had been the largest in company history. World War II would dwarf those numbers. In 1939, Bethlehem Steel employed 13,055 workers at its main Pennsylvania plant. By 1943, employment peaked at 31,523, more than doubled. Nationwide, Bethlehem's workforce swelled to 283,165. That's larger than most American cities. Nearly 300,000 people working for a single company, producing steel. The challenge was enormous. Men were enlisting or being drafted. The workforce was draining away to the military. Who would work in the steel mills? Women. During World War I, women had worked at Bethlehem Steel in small numbers. During World War II, they reached approximately 25,000 nationwide. At the main Bethlehem plant, 2,200 women joined the workforce. They worked as crane operators, welders, inspectors, plant patrol, matrons, sweepers. Jobs previously reserved exclusively for men. Many male workers resented this. The men resented the women coming in to take their places, one historical marker at the site notes, but resentment didn't stop production. The women learned quickly, worked efficiently, contributed enormously. Bethlehem Steel also recruited immigrant laborers from Mexico. The federal government declared steel workers in essential industries exempt from the draft. Workers with families could stay home, keep the furnaces running. The company built housing. Local communities renovated old houses, subdivided large ones. Workers packed into every available space. Some couldn't park closer than 8 blocks from their departments. Bus and trolley routes were overwhelmed. Entry times were staggered to prevent congestion. Shifts ran around the clock. The furnaces never cooled. By 1943, the average Bethlehem steel worker earned $1.30 per hour. That's about $23 per hour in today's money. Good wages, hard work, essential contribution. The machines nobody could duplicate Bethlehem Steel's main plant covered massive territory. 5 blast furnaces dominated the skyline. The largest stood over 230 feet tall. From the westernmost furnace to the easternmost spanned 100 feet, nearly a quarter mile. Each furnace produced 2,600 to 3,000 tons of iron daily. The process required precise measurements: 366 pounds of ore, 1,676 pounds of coke, 724 pounds of limestone, all to produce 1 ton of iron. The No. 2 machine shop, built in 1890, stretched nearly a third of a mile. At the time, it was one of the largest industrial buildings in the world. Inside, workers milled and drilled steel into finished products, weapons, ammunition, ship parts. The scale was incomprehensible. Ladles that could carry 30 men, wheels and cogs that could crush you without difficulty, transfer ladles carrying 100 tons of molten iron. overhead cranes running the length of shops. This wasn't manufacturing. It was industrial warfare. The company employed exceptional photographers to document production: Russell Akins, Robert Yarnall Ritchie, Fred Korth, Fritz Henley. Some were German artists who'd immigrated in the 1930s, fleeing the very regime Bethlehem Steel would help defeat. Their photographs showed furnaces ablaze at night, molten steel flowing like liquid fire, workers dwarfed by machinery. The images were used for public relations, annual reports, recruitment. But they also captured something profound: the sheer industrial might of American manufacturing, the power that would overwhelm the Axis. The production nobody believed possible. Early 1943, Eugene Grace made a promise to President Franklin D. Roosevelt: 1 ship per day. Skeptics laughed. Impossible. No company had ever sustained that pace. Building ships is complex, time-consuming work. Each vessel required thousands of workers. Specialized trades: sheet metal workers, welders, painters, riveters, electricians, pipe fitters, cabinet makers, machinists. Most had never seen a shipyard before the war. Bethlehem Steel had to train them. First, aptitude tests. Determine each person's abilities. Then, specialized training. Advanced shipbuilding techniques. Then put them to work. The company operated 15 shipyards, 37 dry docks, 76 building ways, 11 miles of berthing space. Leading the effort was Arthur B. Homer, Vice President for Shipbuilding. A dour numbers cruncher riveted to the task, he'd studied economics and engineering administration at Brown University. He understood both the business and technical sides. The shipbuilding division employed 175,362 people in 1943, more than 44,000 at the Fairfield Yard in Baltimore alone. One poster read, "America needs ships to sink the rising sun. Let's go, Bethlehem." The workers responded. December 31st, 1943, Staten Island, New York, Bethlehem Shipyard. Eugene Grace stood proud. He'd promised 1 ship per day. He delivered. Actually, he exceeded the promise. 380 ships in 1943. That's 15 more than 1 per day. Over the entire war, Bethlehem Steel produced 127 ships: destroyers, aircraft carriers, heavy cruisers, cargo ships, Liberty ships. The Liberty ships were particularly important. German U-boats were sinking Allied cargo vessels faster than new ones could be built. America needed mass-produced cargo ships. Fast. Liberty ships were ungainly but effective, nicknamed ugly ducklings. Essentially a World War I design that never got into production. The government kept the plans ready. 1 Liberty ship could carry 2,140 jeeps, 440 tanks, or 230 million rounds of rifle ammunition. The first Liberty ship, SS Patrick Henry, was built at Bethlehem's Fairfield Yard in 1941, ready for service in 244 days. By war's end, Fairfield had built 384 Liberty ships. The Bethlehem Hingham Shipyard in Massachusetts set a record: 1 destroyer escort built in 23 days, 5 landing ship tanks built in 50 hours. 50 hours, just over 2 days, to build 5 ocean-going vessels. These achievements earned Bethlehem Steel the Army-Navy E Award. Only 5% of companies received it. The award recognized excellence in quality, efficiency, and record-keeping. Bethlehem won it 2 years in a row. 1/5 of the entire U.S. Navy fleet was constructed under Bethlehem Steel's roof. The workers. Nobody remembers. John Wadolny worked in the Bethlehem Steel forge shop. Before the war, the shop employed 400 men. During the war, 1,000 men and 500 women. The work was brutal. Temperatures soared to unbearable levels. The noise was deafening. Molten metal splashed. Heavy machinery operated constantly. Injuries were common. Althea Culp worked as a stenographer. She and other women handled administrative work that freed men for physical labour. Chick Papley was a metal worker. He remembered, "We would get the metal in full sheets and had to work it until it was to the right consistency. There were no mechanical tools by the time I started working, so we went to work with saws and hammers. Eventually, machines were added when the demand increased for more ships. The job of checker was tedious but necessary. Count rivet holes. Mark them with chalk. Every hole mattered. Missing one could compromise a ship's integrity. James Kilroy worked at the Fore River and Bethlehem Hingham shipyards. He's famous for drawing "Kilroy was here," with a head looking over a wall. The image became one of World War II's most recognizable symbols. Soldiers found it everywhere. It represented the workers who built the machines that won the war. At Bethlehem Hingham, more than 23,500 people worked daily. That was larger than Hingham's entire population. The town had only 8,000 residents. That was larger than Hingham's entire population. The town had only 8,000 residents. Workers came from everywhere, travelled on packed buses and trolleys, worked shifts around the clock, went home exhausted, returned the next day, for years. The process nobody understood. Making steel is violent alchemy. Few outside the industry understood what actually happened inside those furnaces. It started with iron ore. Bethlehem imported high-quality ore from Chilean mines. The company had invested in these mines before World War I. Ore carriers, Bethlehem's own fleet, transported it north. The ore arrived at the plant by railroad, massive quantities, thousands of tons daily. First stop, the blast furnaces. These towering structures dominated the Bethlehem skyline. Inside, temperatures reached 3,000 degrees. The process required precise chemistry. Iron ore contains iron oxide. To extract pure iron, you must remove the oxygen. This requires carbon. Coke, processed coal, provided the carbon. Limestone acted as flux, removing impurities. The formula, 366 pounds of ore, 1,066 pounds of coke, 724 pounds of limestone. Result, 1 ton of molten iron. The mixture was loaded into the top of the blast furnace. Hot air, blast, was forced in from the bottom. The carbon in the coke combined with oxygen from the ore. This created carbon monoxide gas. The gas rose through the furnace. The iron oxide lost its oxygen. Pure, molten iron remained. The iron trickled down, collected at the furnace bottom. Every few hours workers would tap the furnace, open a hole in the bottom. Molten iron flowed out. At 2,500 degrees Celsius, it glowed orange-white, rivers of liquid metal. Workers directed the flow into ladles. Each ladle held up to 100 tons. The heat was unbearable. Workers wore protective gear, but nothing fully protected against temperatures that could melt steel. Men worked in short bursts, retreated to cool down, returned. One mistake meant death. Molten iron touching water created explosions. A crack in a ladle could spill 100 tons of liquid metal. Workers had to be constantly vigilant. The molten iron went to the open hearth furnaces. Here, iron became steel. Steel is iron with controlled carbon content. Too much carbon, brittle, fractures easily. Too little carbon, soft, bends easily. The right amount, strong, flexible, durable. Open hearth furnaces added precise amounts of carbon and other elements. Manganese for strength, chromium for hardness, nickel for toughness. Different steel types required different formulas. Armor plate needed maximum hardness. Ship hull needed flexibility to absorb waves. Gun barrels needed strength to contain explosions. Aircraft parts needed light weight without sacrificing strength. Bethlehem Steel had developed specialized knowledge, decades of experience. proprietary techniques, metallurgical expertise few could match. The company employed scientists in research laboratories. They tested steel samples, analyzed composition, developed new alloys, solved problems. When the Navy wanted thicker armor plate, Bethlehem engineers figured out how to forge it. When the Army needed lighter tank armor, Bethlehem metallurgists developed new alloys. When aircraft manufacturers wanted stronger engine cylinders, Bethlehem researchers created specialized steel. This wasn't just manufacturing. It was materials science, chemical engineering, physics applied to industry. The battles nobody connects midway. June 4–7, 1942, the turning point in the Pacific War. American aircraft carriers defeated 4 Japanese carriers. The battle shifted naval supremacy. Those American carriers, USS Enterprise, USS Yorktown, USS Hornet, were built with Bethlehem Steel, the armor plate protecting their magazines, Bethlehem, the structural steel supporting their flight decks, Bethlehem, the gun mounts firing anti-aircraft weapons, Bethlehem. Yorktown had been damaged at the Battle of Coral Sea just weeks earlier. She limped into Pearl Harbor with a massive hole in her hull. Repair estimates, 3 months. Shipyard workers swarmed the vessel, worked around the clock. 72 hours later, Yorktown sailed for Midway, still damaged but functional. Those emergency repairs used Bethlehem steel, patches welded in place, structural reinforcements hastily installed, good enough to fight. Yorktown launched aircraft that helped sink 3 Japanese carriers. Then Japanese torpedoes found her. She sank June 7th. But she'd contributed to victory. Bethlehem Steel died at Midway, but not before helping win the battle. Guadalcanal, August 1942, February 1943, brutal jungle fighting, naval battles at night, Marine Corps amphibious assaults, the ships supplying Marines, Bethlehem built, the landing craft putting Marines on beaches, Bethlehem designed, the naval gunfire supporting advances, Bethlehem guns firing Bethlehem shells. During the naval battle of Guadalcanal, November 12–15, 1942, American destroyers fought Japanese battleships at point-blank range. Suicidal courage, desperate tactics. American ships were outgunned, but not outfought. USS Juneau was sunk. 5 Sullivan brothers died together, a tragedy that would change Navy policy, but Juneau's sister ships fought on. Atlanta-class cruisers built at Bethlehem's Kearney, New Jersey shipyard. They absorbed punishment, kept firing, held the line. Bethlehem Steel in combat. Taking hits meant for Marines ashore. Normandy, June 6, 1944, D-Day, the largest amphibious invasion in history. The landing craft carrying soldiers to Omaha Beach, Bethlehem built. The Liberty ships offshore providing supplies, Bethlehem manufactured. The naval guns bombarding German positions, Bethlehem forged. Thousands of tons of Bethlehem steel hit the beaches that day. Landing craft, vehicle, personnel, LCVP. Landing craft, tank, LCT. Landing ship, tank, LST. Bethlehem had pioneered mass production of these vessels. Standardized designs, modular construction, assembly line techniques applied to shipbuilding. The Bethlehem Hingham Yard alone built 227 ships for the war. Many were landing craft. They carried soldiers from England to France, from ship to shore, from relative safety to absolute hell. The steel absorbed machine gun fire, deflected shrapnel, kept soldiers alive long enough to reach the beach. Not all made it. Some landing craft took direct hits, sank. Men drowned in armor too heavy to swim, but most made it. And Bethlehem Steel delivered them. The workers nobody could replace. Rose Monroe became famous as Rosie the Riveter. She worked at the Willow Run aircraft factory building B-24 bombers, but thousands of women worked at Bethlehem Steel doing the same work. Their names aren't remembered. No posters featured them. No songs celebrated them. But they were just as essential. Women crane operators lifted 30-ton loads. One mistake could kill workers below. They developed skills equal to men who'd done the job for decades. Women welders joined armor plate. Welds had to be perfect. Weak welds meant ships could crack in combat. Lives depended on quality. Women inspectors examined finished products, checked dimensions with precision calipers, rejected anything below specifications. No exceptions. The women weren't just filling in, they were excelling. Production records set during the war often involved women workers. They proved doubters wrong, not through arguments, through results, but recognition, minimal. After the war, they were fired, expected to return to women's work, cooking, cleaning, childcare. Many resented this deeply. They'd discovered skills, confidence, purpose. They'd earned wages, allowing independence. They'd contributed to victory. And they were dismissed. One wartime poster read, "The men resented the women coming in to take their places. Post-war, women resented being forced to leave. The immigrant workers faced different challenges. Mexican laborers recruited by Bethlehem Steel worked the hardest, dirtiest jobs. The blast furnaces, the foundries, the most dangerous positions. They lived in company housing, often crowded, substandard, paid less than American workers doing identical work, faced discrimination, but they couldn't complain. Immigration status made them vulnerable. Losing the job meant deportation. They worked, they endured, they contributed. After the war, many stayed, built lives in Pennsylvania, raised families, became Americans. Their contribution is forgotten, but it was real. The comparison that shocks consider production numbers more carefully. United States total steel production 1940-1945, approximately 430 million tons. Bethlehem Steel alone, 73 million tons. That's 17% of total American production, one company, 17% of the entire United States. Germany's total steel production, 1940-1945, approximately 200 million tons. Bethlehem Steel alone produced 36.5% of Germany's entire national output. Japan's total steel production, 1940-1945, approximately 31 million tons. Bethlehem Steel alone produced 235% of Japan's total, more than twice as much. One American company versus an entire nation. The Soviet Union produced approximately 73 million tons, 1940-1945, exactly matching Bethlehem Steel. But the Soviets had hundreds of facilities spread across the largest country on Earth. Bethlehem was one company, primarily in Pennsylvania. Britain produced approximately 70 million tons, 1940-1945. Bethlehem Steel alone exceeded Britain's entire national output. These comparisons aren't just impressive, they're staggering. They explain why the Axis lost. You cannot defeat industrial capacity of this magnitude. Germany and Japan combined produced about 231 million tons of steel. The United States alone produced 430 million tons, nearly twice as much. But it's more than quantity, it's integration. American steel went into American ships, built in American yards, with American engines, firing American guns. Axis powers struggled with coordination. Germany built tanks in one place, engines elsewhere, assembly somewhere else. Supply chains were vulnerable. Allied bombing disrupted production. America's geography protected it. No bombs hit Bethlehem. No saboteurs damaged furnaces. No partisan attacks disrupted railroads. Safe, efficient, massive production. Overwhelming. The cost. Nobody calculated the steel came at a price, not just money, human cost. Workers died. Falls from heights, crushed by machinery, burned by molten metal, asphyxiated by fumes. Exact numbers are difficult to determine. The company didn't publicize deaths. Local newspapers might report major accidents. Individual deaths often went unrecorded, but workers remember. Oral histories mention colleagues who didn't come home, friends killed on the job, family members permanently disabled. The pressure for production created safety risks. 101% capacity meant pushing limits, taking shortcuts, accepting dangers. Workers understood. They accepted the risks willingly. The alternative was worse. Slower production meant longer war. Longer war meant more American soldiers dying. Better that steel workers accept risks than soldiers face certain death. The environmental cost was also enormous. Blast furnaces released massive pollution. Soot covered Bethlehem. Air quality was terrible. The Lehigh River ran orange with iron oxide. Nobody cared. Or rather, winning mattered more than pollution. The environment could be cleaned later. First, win the war. This calculus seems alien to modern sensibilities. We prioritize environmental protection. But in 1943, priorities were different. Defeat fascism. Everything else secondary. The workers' health suffered long-term effects. Lung diseases from inhaling metal particles and fumes. Hearing loss from constant noise. Injuries that never fully healed. Many worked decades at Bethlehem Steel. Started young, retired broken. Their pensions were supposed to compensate. Company promised lifetime benefits, healthcare coverage, security, then bankruptcy. Pensions reduced, healthcare eliminated, promises broken. This betrayal cuts deep. Workers gave their bodies. The company took profits, then abandoned them when they were no longer useful. The technology nobody copied. Bethlehem Steel didn't just produce more, they produced better. The company's research laboratory in Bethlehem was among the most advanced in the world. Engineers and metallurgists developed proprietary alloys, special steels for specific applications. One innovation, face-hardened armor plate. Regular armor is uniformly hard. But uniform hardness can be brittle. Shells penetrate, then shatter the armor, sending fragments into the ship. Face hardening creates armor that's extremely hard on the impact surface, but tougher, more flexible on the back. Shells hit the hard face and shatter. The tough back absorbs the impact without fragmenting. This technology saved countless lives. Ships survived hits that would have sunk them with conventional armor. Bethlehem Steel guarded these secrets jealously. Axis powers tried to develop similar armor. They couldn't match Bethlehem's quality. Another innovation, high tensile structural steel, strong enough to support massive weights, light enough to allow construction of larger ships. This enabled aircraft carrier design. Carriers needed enormous flight decks. Structural steel had to support aircraft weighing tons, but the ship itself had to remain relatively light and fast. Bethlehem's engineers solved the problem, developed alloys that were both strong and light. American carriers were larger, faster, and more capable than Japanese carriers. Metallurgy made the difference. The ships that never surrendered USS Enterprise, CV-6, the Big E, the most decorated ship in American history, 20 battle stars, Presidential Unit Citation. Enterprise fought in Midway, Guadalcanal, Eastern Solomons, Santa Cruz, Philippine Sea, Leyte Gulf, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. Every major Pacific battle except Coral Sea. She was hit repeatedly, bombed, torpedoed, kamikazed. Each time she survived. Each time she was repaired. Each time she returned to combat. Enterprise wasn't built by Bethlehem Steel. Newport News. Shipbuilding constructed her, but her armor plate came from Bethlehem, her structural steel came from Bethlehem, her gun mounts came from Bethlehem. When bombs hit, Bethlehem Steel absorbed the impact. When fires raged, Bethlehem Steel maintained structural integrity. When torpedoes exploded against her hull, Bethlehem Steel held. The ship that wouldn't die was protected by steel that wouldn't fail. USS Massachusetts, BB-59, Big Mamie, South Dakota-class battleship, 35,000 tons, 16-inch guns. She fought at Casablanca, Gilbert Islands, Marshall Islands, Mariana Islands, Leyte Gulf, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, never lost a sailor to enemy action. Big Mamie never took a hit that penetrated her armor plate, Bethlehem Steel. 12 inches thick in some places, face hardened, the best armor money could buy. Japanese shells bounced off, German shells shattered against her. She was a floating fortress. Today, Massachusetts is a museum ship in Fall River, Massachusetts. Visitors can walk her decks, see the armor that protected her crew, touch Bethlehem Steel that's over 80 years old, still solid, still strong. These ships represent promise kept. Bethlehem Steel promised to protect American sailors. The steel delivered. The promise nobody breaks. Standing at steel stacks today, looking up at the blast furnaces, you can feel the weight of history. These structures are monuments, not to war, not to industrialization, to promise. Eugene Grace promised Roosevelt 1 ship per day. He delivered 380 ships in 1943 alone. Promise kept. The workers promised to do their part. They produced 73 million tons of steel. Promise kept. Bethlehem Steel promised to arm democracy. They provided 1/3 of all armor plate, 1/4 of warship armor, 70% of airplane cylinder forgings. Promise kept. America promised to be the arsenal of democracy. Bethlehem Steel made that possible. Promise kept. But what about promises to workers? Pensions? Health care? Security? Those promises were broken. When the company filed bankruptcy, workers lost benefits, decades of labor, years of sacrifice, rewarded with broken promises. This is the uncomfortable truth at the heart of Bethlehem Steel's story. The company succeeded brilliantly at its wartime mission. It failed its peacetime responsibilities. The steel that fed an army couldn't sustain a community. The profits that enriched shareholders didn't protect workers. The industrial might that defeated fascism couldn't defeat foreign competition. The lesson is sobering. Victory in war doesn't guarantee success in peace. Industrial dominance doesn't last forever. Promises made must be kept, or bitterness replaces pride. The question nobody answers: could America do it again? If World War III required total industrial mobilization, could the United States respond as it did in 1941, 1945? Could we build 1,127 ships in 4 years? Could one company produce 73 million tons of steel? The honest answer, probably not. American steel production today is a fraction of wartime levels. Most steel is imported. China produces more steel than the rest of the world combined. American blast furnaces have closed. The expertise has retired or died. Bethlehem Steel's closure symbolizes broader deindustrialization. The Rust Belt is real. Manufacturing jobs moved overseas. Heavy industry withered. This creates strategic vulnerability. In wartime, you need steel. You need shipyards. You need skilled workers. You need industrial capacity. If it doesn't exist, you can't simply create it overnight. Building blast furnaces takes years. Training metal workers takes months. Developing expertise takes decades. Bethlehem Steel took 84 years to reach its World War II capability, from 1857 to 1941, nearly a century of development. That knowledge is gone. The furnaces are cold. The workers are retired. The company is dissolved. Modern America would struggle to replicate Bethlehem Steel's achievement. This should concern policymakers. Industrial capacity is national security, but it's not just capacity, it's culture. Bethlehem Steel's workers had a sense of mission. They weren't just earning paychecks, they were defeating fascism, protecting democracy, bringing soldiers home. Purpose motivated them through brutal conditions. Modern workers might lack that motivation, or might not accept the working conditions, or might not stay when jobs are hard and dangerous. Grace could push production to 101% because workers embraced the sacrifice. Would modern workers? The comparison isn't criticism. Working conditions at Bethlehem Steel were often terrible. Safety regulations were inadequate. Workers were exploited. Long-term health effects were ignored. We shouldn't want to return to those conditions, but we should recognize what was lost. The capability, the knowledge, the culture of shared sacrifice. The memorial nobody built. There's no national memorial to Bethlehem Steel workers, no monument on the National Mall, no presidential proclamation honoring their contribution. The World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. honors military service. Rightly so. 16 million Americans served in uniform. 405,000 died. But what about the 283,765 Bethlehem Steel workers? What about the workers at other steel mills, shipyards, factories? 12 million Americans worked in war industries. Their labor was as essential as soldiers' service. Yet they're forgotten. The steel stack site in Bethlehem is the closest thing to a memorial. The preserved blast furnaces stand as monuments. Interpretive signs explain the history. The National Museum of Industrial History tells the story, but it's local, not national. The workers deserve better. Their contribution was national. Their sacrifice was real. Their achievement was decisive. Perhaps this is the memorial, remembering, telling the story, ensuring the next generation understands. 73 million tons of steel didn't produce itself. 1,127 ships didn't build themselves. 1/3 of America's armor plate didn't forge itself. People did that. Ordinary people. Doing extraordinary work. Under extraordinary circumstances. For a cause larger than themselves. The steel that never stops. The ships, Bethlehem Steel built, sailed every ocean. Some still exist as museum ships. Others lie on the ocean floor, casualties of combat. Most were eventually scrapped. But the steel continues. Recycled. Melted down, reformed, reused. Steel doesn't disappear. It transforms. The armor plate from a World War II battleship might now be structural beams in a modern building. The cannon forgings might be automotive parts. The ship hull might be rebar in a bridge. Steel is endlessly recyclable. The molecules persist. In a poetic sense, Bethlehem Steel never stopped feeding armies. The same steel, recycled and reformed, continues serving. The workers are gone. Most have died. The surviving few are in their 90s or beyond. The company is gone. Bankrupt in 2001, dissolved in 2003. Assets sold and scattered. The furnaces are cold. The last pour at the main Bethlehem plant, 1995. 140 years of steel-making ended, but the steel remains. Transformed but persistent, just like the legacy. Every modern American ship carries the DNA of Bethlehem Steel's innovations. Every naval architect understands principles Bethlehem engineers developed. Every metallurgist builds on knowledge Bethlehem researchers pioneered. The company died. The knowledge lives, and the reminder persists. When the nation needed steel, one company delivered. When democracy needed defenders, workers answered. When the world hung in balance, Bethlehem Steel tipped the scales. One company, one Pennsylvania town, one critical moment in history. September 3rd, 1939, Eugene Grace predicted his company would make money. He was right. But the story is bigger than profit. Bethlehem Steel made steel. That steel made ships. Those ships made victory possible. 73 million tons of possibility. 1,127 vessels of hope. Countless lives saved by armor that held, guns that fired, ships that sailed, the steel mill that fed an entire army and helped save the world. The blast furnaces stand silent now, monuments to what was, reminders of what's possible, warnings of what's lost. But the steel persists, in bridges and buildings, in ships and structures, in the foundations of modern America, built by workers whose names we've forgotten, forged in furnaces that have gone cold, shaped by a company that no longer exists, yet it remains, strong, enduring, eternal, just like the promise it represented, that when America faces existential threat, ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things. That industrial might can defeat military tyranny. That workers' sacrifice matters as much as soldiers' service. That steel, properly forged, can change the world. Bethlehem Steel proved it. Once. The question for our time, can we do it again if we must? Or have we lost something irreplaceable? The cold furnaces offer no answer. They stand. They remember. They wait, just like the steel they produced, waiting to be needed again, ready to serve, forever. 73 million tons of steel. That's what Bethlehem Steel produced during World War II, from 1940 to 1945. To understand the scale, compare it to Britain's total national output. Bethlehem Steel alone matched an entire nation. The steel went everywhere. 1/3 of all armor plate used by the United States. 1/4 of armor plate for warships. 1/3 of big cannon forgings. 70% of airplane cylinder forgings. But also bomb casings, armor-piercing shells, gun forgings, airplane parts, engines, airfield landing mats, submarine air flasks, railway equipment, tank forgings, wire ropes, cables, structural steel for defense plants. During the 1942-1943 battles for Guadalcanal, it was possible for a sailor to be on a ship built from Bethlehem Steel, propelled by engines constructed at the Bethlehem plant, protected by armor plate from the plant, and firing guns and shells produced at the plant. Everything. One company. Vertical integration taken to its ultimate conclusion. The company also repaired, converted, or serviced 37,778 ships during the war. Damaged vessels limped into Bethlehem shipyards. Workers patched holes, replaced armor, rebuilt engines, sent them back to combat. Grace pushed production to 101% of usual capacity, 101%, beyond theoretical maximum, operating furnaces, mills, and shops beyond design specifications, taking risks, accepting wear and tear, because the war demanded it. The symbol nobody could see, the Star of Bethlehem, had shone since 1937, 91 feet tall, electric, visible for miles, built by Bethlehem Steel itself. It sat atop South Mountain, overlooking the city, a symbol of hope during the Great Depression. Part of a campaign by the Chamber of Commerce and Mayor Robert Feifel to revive Bethlehem's holiday retail trade, the star represented the city's name, the city of Bethlehem, the Christmas city, the Prince of Peace. Then Pearl Harbor happened. December 7th, 1941. The plug was pulled. The Star of Bethlehem went dark. Bethlehem Steel was America's top military contractor. The city was a potential high-profile target for enemy bombers. The glowing star could guide them. It would be cruel irony, the symbol of the Prince of Peace, used to guide bombers to destroy the arsenal of democracy. the enemy never reached Bethlehem, never seriously threatened the continental United States. The Atlantic and Pacific Oceans provided protection. American industrial might, embodied by Bethlehem Steel, ensured enemies stayed far away. But the darkened star was a reminder. This city mattered. What happened here determined the war's outcome. The furnaces must keep burning. The ships must keep launching. The steel must keep flowing. The buildings nobody forgets. Bethlehem Steel didn't just build weapons. The company constructed America itself. 80% of New York City's skyscrapers, the Empire State Building, the Chrysler Building, Rockefeller Plaza, Madison Square Garden, bridges, Golden Gate Bridge, George Washington Bridge, Ben Franklin Bridge, other structures, Hoover Dam, Alcatraz Island Prison, U.S. Supreme Court Building. These weren't wartime contracts. They were built during peacetime, showcasing Bethlehem Steel's capabilities. But they demonstrated something crucial. American industrial capacity could build anything. Skyscrapers today, battleships tomorrow. The same expertise that erected the Golden Gate Bridge forged aircraft carriers. The same precision that created the Chrysler Building manufactured naval guns. This versatility was uniquely American. Soviet industry could mass-produce tanks, but couldn't build skyscrapers. German industry could craft precision weapons, but lacked raw capacity. Japanese industry could build warships, but had limited steel production. Only America combined precision, scale, versatility, and speed. Bethlehem Steel embodied all four. The transformation. Nobody planned before the war. Bethlehem Steel's gross sales totaled $135 million. By war's end, $1.33 billion, nearly 10 times larger. The profits were enormous. Grace's golf course prediction proved conservative. They didn't just make a lot of money, they made unprecedented fortunes. But money wasn't the whole story. The war transformed Bethlehem Steel from a steel producer into a complete military-industrial complex. Vertical integration, mining iron ore, transporting it, smelting it, forging it, machining it, assembling it into ships, aircraft, weapons. The company controlled every step. Chilean iron mines provided high-quality ore. A fleet of ore carriers transported it. Pennsylvania coal mines supplied fuel. Railroads moved materials. 15 shipyards built vessels. Fabrication plants created components. No other company matched this integration. The transformation also affected the workforce permanently. Women proved they could do men's work. They operated cranes, welded steel, inspected armor plate. When male workers returned from war, companies promptly fired female workers. But the precedent was set. Women's participation in heavy industry had been proven possible. The town of Bethlehem transformed too. Population swelled. Housing expanded. Entertainment venues thrived. Money flowed. By 1943, Pennsylvania led the world in steel production. The Pittsburgh area alone produced 27% of the nation's steel. 41% of American steel came from within a half-hour train ride. This concentration created vulnerability. One successful bombing raid could cripple national production, but it also created efficiency. Suppliers, workers, expertise, all concentrated, production optimized. As Grace later said, it was the miracle of American production that spelled the doom of the Axis powers. The comparison nobody made. Consider this comparison. Germany entered the war with advanced steel production. Their Krupp works had centuries of experience, precision engineering, technological innovation. But Germany's steel production during the entire war, approximately 200 million tons. Bethlehem Steel alone produced 73 million tons. One American company produced more than 1/3 of Germany's total national output. Japan's situation was worse. Limited iron ore deposits, dependence on imports, vulnerable supply lines. Ironically, Bethlehem Steel had sold pig iron and scrap metal to Japan starting in 1936, under contract with the Emperor. Japan needed raw materials to build their military. America sold it to them. Until 1940, when the US government shut off all exports of war-essential goods to Japan. By then, Japan had stockpiled American steel. The tanks that attacked Pearl Harbor might have been built from Bethlehem Steel. This uncomfortable fact highlights American industrial dominance. Even while supplying future enemies, American production exceeded everyone. The Soviet Union had vast industrial capacity. But much was destroyed in the German invasion. Lend-Lease provided crucial supplies. American steel, shipped across dangerous waters, kept Soviet factories running. Britain's production was substantial but limited by size and German bombing. British steel workers produced valiantly, but Bethlehem Steel alone matched their entire nation. Only America had isolated factories immune from bombing, vast natural resources, massive workforce, technological expertise, efficient transportation, capital for expansion. Bethlehem Steel exemplified all these advantages. The work nobody could sustain. The human cost of this production is often forgotten. Steel work is dangerous. Molten metal at 2500 degrees, heavy machinery, toxic fumes, deafening noise, physical exhaustion. Workers in the blast furnaces endured hellish conditions. Heat so intense their skin blistered, fumes that damaged lungs, accidents that maimed or killed. Safety regulations existed, but were often ignored to meet production quotas. Grace pushed for 101% capacity. That meant cutting corners, taking risks, prioritizing output over safety. Workers developed long-term health problems, hearing loss from noise, lung disease from fumes, burns and injuries, exhaustion-related illnesses. After the war, many fought for compensation. Some succeeded, many didn't. The company also processed uranium fuel rods from 1949-1952 at the Lackawanna plant. Workers weren't told about radiation dangers. Later, some sought compensation under radiation exposure laws. Most were denied because uranium processing produces chemical poisoning rather than cancer-causing radiation levels. Small comfort to workers who suffered. The shipyard workers faced different challenges: long hours on their feet, dangerous heights, heavy materials, weather exposure. Building one ship per day meant punishing schedules, no breaks, no slowdowns, constant pressure. Workers embraced the pressure willingly. They knew their work mattered. Every ship saved American lives. Every shell might destroy an enemy position. Every armor plate protected a sailor. Motivation wasn't just money, it was purpose. Defeating fascism, protecting democracy, bringing soldiers home. This motivation sustained workers through years of brutal labor. The victory nobody questioned, May 8, 1945, VE Day, Germany surrendered. August 15, 1945, VJ Day, Japan surrendered. World War II ended. Bethlehem Steel's contribution was decisive. Not just important, decisive. Consider counterfactuals. What if Bethlehem Steel hadn't existed? What if American steel production had been limited to other companies? The Navy wouldn't have had enough ships. The Army wouldn't have had enough tanks. The Air Force wouldn't have had enough aircraft. The Marines wouldn't have had enough landing craft. Logistics would have collapsed. Lend-Lease to Britain and Soviet Union would have been impossible. The industrial base supporting 16 million American service members wouldn't have existed. Germany and Japan would have had more time to develop weapons, more time to consolidate conquered territories, more time to commit atrocities. Historians cite Bethlehem Steel's ability to quickly manufacture warships and military equipment as decisive factors in American victories in both world wars. Lance Metz, historian, Bethlehem Steel was the most important to America's national defense of any company in the past century. We wouldn't have won World War I and World War II without it. That's not hyperbole. It's assessment based on production numbers. 1,127 ships, 73 million tons of steel, 1/3 of all armor plate, 1/4 of warship armor, 70% of airplane cylinder forgings. Numbers don't lie. The decline nobody prevented after the war, Bethlehem Steel seemed invincible. European and Japanese steel industries lay in ruins. American mills produced 40% of the world's steel. Bethlehem Steel was second only to US Steel. Demand seemed endless. Rebuilding Europe, interstate highway system, suburban expansion, automobile boom, but cracks appeared. The 1959 steel strike lasted 116 days. United Steelworkers of America shut down production nationwide. American consumers turned to foreign steel. Asian manufacturers charged less. European mills rebuilt with modern technology. American steel companies, including Bethlehem, had aging equipment. World War II production had pushed machinery beyond limits. Post-war, companies should have modernized. They didn't. Profits were distributed to shareholders instead of reinvested. Corporate culture became complacent. Nepotism, closed management, resistance to change. One analyst noted, the gung-ho management never educated up-and-coming management what to do in times of distress. Oil crises in the 1970s devastated American heavy industry. Recessions in the early 1970s and 1980s crushed demand. Foreign competition intensified. The steel belt became the rust belt. Cities dependent on steel mills collapsed. Gary, Indiana, Youngstown, Ohio, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Bethlehem wasn't immune. In 1982, Bethlehem Steel posted a loss of $1.5 billion. Most steelmaking operations were suspended. Tens of thousands laid off. The company struggled on for 2 more decades. 1995, the main Bethlehem plant ceased steel production. 140 years of manufacturing ended. 1997, shipbuilding operations ceased. 2001, the company filed for bankruptcy. 2003, final dissolution. Assets sold to International Steel Group. The blast furnaces went cold. The forges fell silent. The shipyards closed. The legacy. Nobody erases today. The Bethlehem Steel site is Steel Stacks, an arts and entertainment district. The blast furnaces remain, towering monuments, repurposed, not demolished. Visitors can walk through the site, see the massive machinery, imagine the heat, noise, and intensity of production, learn the history. The National Museum of Industrial History in Bethlehem preserves corporate records. Hagley Museum and Library in Delaware holds additional archives. Photographs document the operation. Oral histories capture workers' memories. Former workers gather occasionally. They remember the camaraderie, the pride, the knowledge that their work mattered, that they had contributed to something larger than themselves. Many lost pensions when Bethlehem Steel declared bankruptcy. The Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation assumed obligations, but retirees received less than promised. Healthcare benefits disappeared. Bitterness remains. They gave their bodies, their health, their years. The company profited enormously, then abandoned them. But pride remains too. They built 1,127 ships. They forged weapons that defeated fascism. They fed an army. Without them, without Bethlehem Steel, World War II's outcome might have been different. The lesson nobody learns. Bethlehem Steel's story teaches uncomfortable truths about American industry. The capability exists. When necessary, America can mobilize industrial might that dwarfs other nations. Bethlehem Steel proved it in 2 world wars. But that capability requires conditions, motivated workers, corporate investment in facilities and training, government contracts providing stability, a cause larger than profit. Post-war, those conditions disappeared. Workers were laid off, facilities aged, shareholders extracted profits. No unifying cause motivated sacrifice. The decline was predictable, not inevitable, but predictable. Modern America faces similar challenges. Manufacturing capacity has moved overseas. Steel production occurs in China, India, elsewhere. American heavy industry withered. If another total war required mobilization, could America respond? Could modern companies match Bethlehem Steel's achievement? Could we build 1,127 ships in 4 years? Could we produce 73 million tons of steel? Could we train hundreds of thousands of workers in specialized trades? The infrastructure barely exists. The expertise has retired or died. The facilities have been demolished or repurposed. Bethlehem Steel's closure wasn't just one company failing, it was the loss of irreplaceable industrial capacity. The people nobody thanked, Eugene Grace, retired in 1957. He'd led Bethlehem Steel for 41 years, built it into the second largest steel producer in the world, delivered on his promise to Roosevelt, exceeded it. He died wealthy, honored, respected. The workers, many struggled, their bodies broken by years of brutal labor, their pensions often inadequate, their jobs eventually eliminated. No parades honored them, no monuments bore their names, no presidential medals, just fading memories, aging photographs. Oral histories preserved by local museums, yet they were the ones who built the ships. They forged the armor plate. They operated the blast furnaces at 101% capacity. They worked through exhaustion, injury, danger for years. They deserve remembering, not just as statistics: 283,765 employees, 73 million tons of steel, 1,127 ships, but as individuals. John Wadolny in the forge shop, Althea Culp at her desk, Chick Papley shaping metal, James Kilroy drawing his famous graffiti, the 2,200 women who proved themselves in men's work, the thousands whose names we don't know. They fed an army, they built a navy, they armed an air force, they won a war. The steel that never stops. The ships Bethlehem Steel built sailed every ocean. Some still exist as museum ships. Others lie on the ocean floor, casualties of combat. Most were eventually scrapped, but the steel continues, recycled, melted down, reformed, reused. Steel doesn't disappear. It transforms. The armor plate from a World War II battleship might now be structural beams in a modern building. The cannon forgings might be automotive parts. The ship hull might be rebar in a bridge. Steel is endlessly recyclable. The molecules persist. In a poetic sense, Bethlehem Steel never stopped feeding armies. The same steel, recycled and reformed, continues serving. The workers are gone. The company is gone. The furnaces are cold, but the steel remains. Transformed but persistent, just like the legacy. One company, one Pennsylvania town, one critical moment in history. When the world needed steel, Bethlehem answered. When America needed ships, Grace delivered. When soldiers needed weapons, workers forged them. 73 million tons of possibility. 1,127 vessels of hope, countless lives saved by armour that held, guns that fired, ships that sailed, the steel mill that fed an entire army and helped save the world.